Welcome everyone to our next weekly Stockwaves webinar. The topic for this week is going to be biotechs. So we'll start off by taking a look at the most popular biotech ETF, XBI. And then we will look at some of the individual names. We're going to look at, rather than by the weighting in XBI, we're going to look at the ones that have the highest market cap. So starting off with the XBI chart, we have what looks like a very nice flat structure that has filled out corrective flat off of the 2018 high, which I'm viewing as a possible cycle degree fourth wave. This is going back to basically the beginning of this ETF, which we don't have as much price history on here as some of the other biotech ETFs such as IBB or some of the biotech indexes, but those charts do have further data that supports this being a cycle degree wave 1, 2, the third wave into the 2018 high, and this flat structure potentially completing a cycle degree fourth wave. So we've seen some pretty good outperformance in the biotech sector since the bottom that was struck in March. In the case of XBI, we're almost back to the prior highs that we saw last year and in 2018. The price structure off of the low so far is only 3 waves at this point, but we have already exceeded a measured move fib, this 100% at 91.15, and are now reaching fibs that are more standard for a third wave within a possible leading diagonal. So we've tagged the 1236 fib there at 96.24. The next resistance would be the 1382 at 99.54. So it is possible that we attempt a local top soon as what would be wave 3 of this leading diagonal and get a near-term pullback in a possible fourth wave with support down at 86.32 initially. The alternative could be that maybe a large degree fifth itself turns into a big ending diagonal, and this is an initial 3-wave move to the upside as an ABC is maybe all of wave 1, but more likely just an A wave within a larger wave 1. It really depends on the size of the next pullback that we get once we see a local top being attempted, which we still need a little bit more evidence of. But basically, this continues to overall look bullish, and again, that is supported by this nice flat structure that we have since 2018 that looks complete for what, again, I'm counting as a cycle degree fourth wave. So again, we're going to go down the list by market cap, starting with AMGN. AMGN, really the overlap that we have in the price structure going back to this low that was made in 2015 supports what I believe is a diagonal structure, an ending diagonal structure that potentially actually could have counted as complete at last year's high. However, we didn't break below the prior low here or the uptrend line, so there is certainly a reasonable interpretation where we can view this as still working on the fifth, or even a more bullish option would be that this is where the primary degree 3-4 completed, and this is now a large degree fifth wave to the upside being attempted. So at least, compared to some of the other charts that we will look at that may have room for a lot higher, this isn't quite as clearly set up for a substantial amount of further upside. Maybe continuing. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say for the red 3-4, if you move the 3 over to where your intermediate 3 is, you can compress the ending diagonal a little bit more into that high and then count it as an expanded flat. If it's going to be at the larger degree, I think that makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, that would work. But we have a similar option off of the March low so far compared to that XBI chart. This could be attempting a top soon, either already in place or maybe needing one more local high as a third, and then pulling back in a fourth wave with if already topped 221 as initial support, and then 215.70 from there. Next up is ABBV. Bigger picture here, we have a much larger ending diagonal potentially filling out off of the 2012 low. This bullish potential really relies on price maintaining above the low that was seen in March. That was basically a retest of the 2019 low and shouldn't dip any lower than that in order to, again, maintain the setup for primary fifth wave filling out. So under that potential, ideally we still have more upside in what would be wave C of the larger A wave within that fifth, kind of in the, I would say, 105 to 115 range would be ideal to see before that wave C of A completes and we begin to pull back again in a B wave. A little bit different structure off of the March low here. It is also 3 waves, but this fits maybe a little bit better as an ABC up for what would be wave 1 of an ending diagonal for this C wave, which would allow for a pullback to a 382 to 618 retracement between around 76 to 70 as the wave 2 before continuing beyond. Next up is GILD. Lots of volatility recently in this name for obvious reasons. The therapeutic drug that was suggested as effective against the coronavirus, which we got the news today that it flopped in the drug trial recently. So it's a chart that really doesn't have a very clear LA wave setup. Again, it's just a messy back and forth over this last several months here. Technically, this 1-2 to the downside is still valid for the bearish potential in blue, but not something I'm really interested in shorting yet, and I could just as easily make a case for continuing higher in what would be wider flat as a B wave. I don't, at the moment, see anything more confidently bullish than the wider flat and the red B. So again, just a name that personally I haven't really found much interest in. Moving on is VRTX. The continuation to the upside here is starting to get a little bit large for what still is possible, though, as a wave 5 of C for this primary wave 3 top. Another situation where you have a lot of overlap in the price structure that leaves you without as reliable of a micro count. But if this really is more bullish and is going to continue substantially higher from here, then I'd really be looking at around the upper 400 to 500 region as a possible target in what could be, rather than this A, B, and C wave, this could be a 1-2 of a larger diagonal, A, B, and then working on a C wave that can extend up to a standard 1, 2, 3, 6 extension, which is common for the third within a diagonal. So I'm not necessarily bearish here, but another chart which isn't quite as confidently set up for further extension to the upside, but certainly not ruling it out. Moving on to REGN. This is a chart that looks much more confidently bullish to me. Even if we're going to ignore this part as a larger possible 1-2 and just view the move in isolation off of the 2005 low, it works very well as a primary 1, 2, 3, 4 complete into the recent 2019 bottom, and price be getting a primary fifth wave to the upside, which I actually think could reach a little bit higher than where I initially placed that label. So if price is going to fill out that fifth wave to the upside, the next question becomes, do we fill that out as a standard impulse, or do we do so as more of a diagonal structure? For the time being, it is still possible that we attempt to do so as more of a standard impulse, kind of similar to what I was showing in the XBI chart. This may be nearing a local top as a wave 3 to set up a consolidation as a fourth, followed by a fifth up, and that would be the larger wave 1 of the primary fifth. So this one, compared to the names that we've looked at so far, would certainly be at the top of my list as candidates that I would view as a decent setup for trading. Next up is BIIB. There are two potential paths here, somewhat similar to the GILD chart. The bearish potential is in blue. The bullish potential is that this was a more significant bottom, and this is 5 up as a 1-2. Before I get too bullish on this chart, I need to see 5 waves up, which off the March low so far, we only have 3 waves. Now we can view that as a possible A, B, and set up for a C wave for a little bit deeper wave 2 under the bullish potential in red, but for the time being, I don't have an immediate setup here to go long. So we'll see if we do continue lower from here, if it attempts to hold probably close to the 764 retracement at around 245 for the wave 2 in red. If that fails to hold, then this may be set up to continue lower in the blue count. Next up is SGEN, which basically held a higher level consolidation as a possible running flat as the primary 4th wave there. Price has filled out high enough that compared to the rest of the structure, you could view the majority of that primary 5th wave actually already complete. I could certainly view another 4-5 here that could take it closer to around the 160 to 190 region as possible. But compared to, for example, the REGN chart, just not as confident for a substantial amount of further upside here. Next up is ALXN. The way that price has rebounded off of the March low is making me consider a much smaller ending diagonal, potentially already complete for this wave C of the cycle 4th here. It came a little bit shy of a measured move, 100% fib, but in between the 764 and the 100%, I think is enough downside that it's reasonable, even if we were to view this as maybe 1 degree smaller, 3rd and 4th, reasonable to consider this as an entire complete correction off of the 2015 high. So this looks a lot better in comparison to some of those other charts as well, as far as setting up a substantial amount of further upside over maybe the next several years, similar to the REGN chart off of our low so far. I would view it fairly similar, although in this case you could just view it as a standard impulse, filling out off of the low as 1-2 and potentially attempting a top in a 3rd, consolidating in a 4th with room for a little bit lower, support between $100.50 and $97.73, and a 5th up from there to follow to give us a nice 5 waves off the low. Next up is INCY. It's a chart that we had actually remained bullish on as long as price was holding above the 2018 low. Really took its time filling out this wider flat structure as either the blue wave 2 or the red B wave, but it did hold key support and has rebounded strongly off of there. The initial target was this measured move here at 97.37 for a possible ABC flat in red, but we're starting to push past that, which is increasing the probability of further upside still ahead under the impulsive blue count. So the next resistance approaching is the 1-2-3-6 fib at 108.12 as a possible target for wave 3 of 3, consolidate from there in wave 4 of 3, and then fill out the 5th of 3rd from there up to 128. So again, 108.12 upcoming resistance. If we turn down from there, 97.37 to 87.69 should be support that holds to maintain the setup for further upside within the impulsive blue count. Next up on mRNA, It's starting to stretch a little bit beyond expectations for a fifth wave here. So there are other possible interpretations that could be more bullish, especially if price exceeds the high that was recently seen earlier this month. It overthrew the trend channel, so it's still technically valid as this fifth and may get a much deeper pullback. But I'm not ruling out the potential that this is more near-term bullish than this count would currently suggest. It's just not a chart that has a clear impulsive path, so a little bit more difficult to place some confidence behind that. But if price is going to maintain the setup for something more substantially bullish than that diagonal count, support that I would prefer to see hold is 41.79. And that would be as a 1-2-1-2. This would be wave 3. Maybe that was all of a wave 4 of 3, but this could be an A, B, C. And, as long as we're holding that support, so kind of maybe closing this gap and then turning back up, then I could certainly see the potential for this to be much more bullish.
So I'm giving this potential to be one of the rare exceptions to only getting a smaller version of the Cowbung IPO pattern. And it's very messy, but if you include after hours data on February 10th that popped up to 25.50 in the morning, then you can get a possible 5 waves up into February 27. And then a measured move off of the retrace into the March 13 low can be projecting up and playing pretty good Fibonacci pinball, targeting possibly all the way up towards 101 or even higher. But I'm looking at the same 40-41 region as support for a small degree wave 4, and then up towards 64, maybe even stretching up towards the 70s as a third after that, and then holding 50 region again, and then possibly heading up towards 100.
So you're viewing this portion as 5 up for wave 1?
Yeah, it's pretty ugly unless you include that that after hours peak, and even at that after hour, or it's an early morning peak, and even then it still is an awkward looking 5 up, but it did get a pretty clean ABC retrace and is playing pretty good Fibonacci pinball from there.
Yeah, even without that after hours move, I don't think it's too unreasonable to view it as such, just as a leading diagonal here with a slightly outsized fifth wave. But yeah, a lot of the bullish potential, I think, depends on holding, around 40. We can give it maybe a little bit lower than that, 50%, but that's what it should hold to maintain this standard impulse path to the upside, with 60 to 78.50 is the next target region if support there does hold. All right, moving on to BMRN. This chart could have, had we, not bounced so high here off of this 2019 low, maybe set up one more drop when we were turning down on the market last month. But the way it's really acted since then, I think, is supportive enough of the potential that it's a little awkward. I'm not sure how it would best be counted, maybe as kind of a running WXY structure, but basically consolidated and corrected sideways rather than fulfilling down into the target, and basically maintained this relatively parallel trend channel for the larger diagonal structure, to the point where I think it's not unreasonable to view this as complete with a cycle wave 4. So this is another chart that I think has some pretty good potential, and I think just another positive that it was able to hold a higher low here during the downturn in the market into the March low, and that was following a nice impulsive move to the upside off of the 2019 low. So this actually could be a B or 1-2 setup to the upside. Based on the price structure so far off the March low, I think we can default at the time being to a 1-2. but I'll throw an AB in there as an alternative. And this really could just continue to power higher here as a wave 3 of 3 or wave 3 of C, and I'll put it as the alternative again. Chart, so this would be an A as an alternative, B, and then we'll put it at the 1382 as the target for the C initially, but it could also target the 1618. But basically, you can, I would say, easily treat this as bullish as long as we're holding above the April low, and even could just be set up to just continue to press higher as the heart of a third wave in either this red C or this blue wave 3. So this is another pretty good looking chart as far as being longer term bullish. And then the last name from those larger cap companies is ALNY. Not a chart that I have been paying too close attention to because the larger recount is pretty messy here. I'm not really in love with the size of this one too in comparison to this red 3-4 here, but really strictly from a technical analysis, kind of ignoring the EW count here, you could make a case, I would say, for a cup and handle here. This being the cup, it's a little large for the handle, but I still think reasonable, and there's pretty clear resistance at these prior highs here that if price is able to power past there, could certainly send it significantly higher into the, I would say, at least mid 200 to maybe even mid 300 region next. So again, not the clearest daily wave count, but I don't otherwise view it as bearish. This could certainly continue the upside.
I know that you have all the data before, and I have that now too, but off of the 2011 low, you can get that 5 waves up, which obviously looks like a C wave, but then it seems like people are forgetting that there was prior data and that they just see that nice 5 up and a possible retrace and then a new 5 up there that came right to the 50% in the extension of a possible C or a third wave off of that move. So also looks like a pretty nice leading diagonal getting the 5th wave now off of the December 2018 low. So if this gets a really nice corrective retrace holding the 90 region, maybe into the 80s, I'd be pretty bullish.
Right, and if I were to come up with kind of the best fit for an Elliott wave count as far as supporting that further upside, this would probably be what I would lean toward. Maybe this wave C of 3 is going to take shape as an ending diagonal. But I mean, you could certainly make a case for 5 up there. So, you know what, I'm going to put an 80
like that,
just for the time being.
It's a little bit big for just the A wave of the third, because it actually did that get to the 1236 or it got to the 1382 for that primary degree A wave?
Right, you could view that as the third and the fourth as well, right. And this is an AB and starting the C wave.
But just zooming into the daily chart, that move off of 2016 and then again the leading diagonal off of 2018 is pretty bullish looking. So if it holds a retrace, then that one looks like a decent setup for a lot higher.
Right, you may get a false breakout here where we do slightly exceed the high and what would be the 5th of an LD, and then consolidate again and then make the attempt at the real breakout closer to the later half of this year. All right, that should be all of the major cap names. We can take a look at some of these smaller